many of those, Steve Pound, Virendra Sharma, Seema Malhotra, absolutely wrapped around the airport. They all voted for Heathrow.
It's the jobs, yeah.
Why? Because so many of their constituents have well-paid, unionised jobs at Heathrow, and also they recognise this is maintaining opportunities for the youngsters in those communities as well. They were actually voting both for their constituents and indeed for the national interest.
And this is a big issue, isn't it, actually? The MPs who are most opposed to it, the local areas most opposed to it, are where they get none of the jobs. They tend to be rather the wealthier, leafy suburbs of London, where it's actually the people who use the planes.
Interestingly enough, when I was the Transport Minister and writing the 2003 Aviation White Paper, what we found was many of those constituencies that had the highest level of supposed opposition also had the highest propensity to fly out of Heathrow.
There is some irony, is there not, Chris Williamson in the Boris Johnson flying out to Afghanistan, not from Heathrow, interestingly, but flying out to Afghanistan to avoid a vote about expanding an airport?
Well, there was a certain irony there with Boris, but you can't really take very much of what Boris says seriously on any issue, frankly. But I disagree with John. I don't think this is in the national interest at all. And I'm sick to death of huge infrastructure investment projects going into the southeast. I mean, there is another country now outside of London. And, we don't just need one hub airport. I mean, what about East Midlands Airport just up the road from me? What about Gatwick? What about Stansted, which would have been, I think, more suitable sites if we're going to have another one in London? What about Birmingham? What about Manchester?
But isn't the whole point of a hub airport is we do need it to be it's one major airport, and the point is that people don't want to fly into East Midlands Airport; they want to fly into London.
Well, I'm not actually sure that necessarily everybody wants to go to London to fly off to other destinations, but other cities around the world, major cities around the world, have several hub airports, in their locality, and I just think Heathrow is completely unsuitable. The cost of it is prohibitive. We're going to lead to considerably more congestion. I think it's going to result in reductions in the money available for infrastructure projects elsewhere in the country. It's going to have a detrimental impact, I think, on flights out of East Midlands Airport. But the other important thing is the impact on air quality in London, and also our inability, it seems to me, as a result of going ahead with this decision, if indeed it ever does reach fruition, the impact on our climate change obligations. I mean, we are bound by the Climate Change Act, and this has driven a coach and horses straight through it.
But the Airport Commission was set up under Cameron, an independent airport commission. There have been numerous commissions, numerous reviews by independent experts, and they've all come up with Heathrow is where you need to build this airport. Why do you think that the MPs know better than the people who spent years looking at this?
Well, they didn't convince the Transport Select Committee, who spent a very good deal of time examining all the evidence, and the chair of the Transport Select Committee spoke very eloquently yesterday in the House of Commons, setting out her objections, really, to going ahead with this decision. And frankly, I just don't think, just apply common sense, Julia. There is a world outside, or there's a country outside of London, is there not? And, this is yet another investment in London. It's bound to have a detrimental impact on air quality. It's going to cause huge congestion as a consequence of it, and it's going to take away investment from other parts of the United Kingdom.
Chris, thank you. No, John, let me come back to John. John Spellar. Look, Chris Williamson raised a lot of different issues about the congestion, about the pollution, about the fact that this is yet another London-centric major infrastructure project. When you were a Transport Minister, let's face it, this has been kicked into the long grass by Blair, by Gordon Brown, we've kicked in the grass before Blair, actually, Gordon Brown and David Cameron, that actually, is there a strong case for this airport to actually have been built somewhere else, not in one of the most congested parts of the country?
Actually, Gordon Brown decided to go ahead. It's David Cameron, who thought he could win seats in West London, who ditched it and then was propped up by Nick Clegg on this. But, look, London Heathrow is not in competition in that sense with Manchester or East Midlands or Birmingham. The big competition, I said in the Commons yesterday, is with Amsterdam, Frankfurt and Paris Charles de Gaulle. And those flights are going to take place. The CO2 argument is frankly irrelevant. Those flights are going to take place because that's the way the world is going, greater interconnectivity. And therefore the question is whether that will be in the UK or not. And that's why you need one major hub airport. But of course, we ought to be looking for the good of the country as well as the good of the regions at where we can do flights elsewhere. Plus the fact that a huge number of businesses across the country will also be supplying goods and services into Heathrow and also exporting via Heathrow. Now, East Midlands has a big role in freight, and that's very welcome. It's a big logistics depot for the region and for the country. But if we're talking about exports of high value, having that volume of traffic going out of Heathrow is enormously important.
Okay, and Chris Williamson, John said anything to persuade you?
No, I'm afraid he hasn't. And, the Transport Select Committee can refer to their deliberations and their conclusions. They say that as a consequence of going ahead with Heathrow, if it does ever actually happen, will result in 170,000 fewer flights from non-London airports. And as far as East Midlands is concerned, according to the Transport Select Committee, that means nearly 6,000 fewer flights out of the East Midlands airport. So, there is no redeeming features, it seems to me, for this decision, and it's going to now get bogged down, I'm pretty certain, in a legal...
That's the question of if and when it does actually happen. We are talking possibly many, many more years to come. Nigel, first of all, I must ask you, in terms of your colleague, Mr. Boris Johnson, did he do... I mean, you say you chuckle, and we tend to have that reaction to things that Boris Johnson does. He was very clear that he was not going to ever vote for this. Should he have done the decent thing and resigned from the cabinet to vote against Heathrow rather than sneaking off to Afghanistan?
No, and to be honest, the verdict of Parliament yesterday probably demonstrates why not. It was 415 against 119.
Nigel, can I stop you there? We've got a terrible quality line. We'll try and get a better line while we have a word, if I will, with Amelia Womack. Amelia, as Deputy Leader of the Green Party, I think we can pretty much guess where the Green Party would stand on this issue, not in favour of this on environmental grounds. But do you think the Heathrow expansion will actually ever go ahead?
Well, obviously, I'm hoping that it won't go ahead, especially with this legal action. I think it's very clear that there's no long-term strategy when it's come to this. We have signed a Paris Agreement saying that we will keep ourselves to below 1.5 degrees of warming, and this fundamentally doesn't adhere to that commitment that we've made. On top of that, yesterday we saw the government pull out of the tidal lagoon in Wales as well, and I feel that this is a double blow to environmentalism in one day.
I think there were quite strong economic costs against pulling out of that, though, weren't there?
I mean, the Welsh Assembly wanted this. This is a devolved issue. I'm from South Wales, and this was something that Wales really wanted in terms of jobs, in terms of being a world leader in a new technology. And that investment was there. It was just the strike price that needed to be agreed.
Wait a minute, you mentioned...
And we see that commitment to nuclear.
You mentioned local people want it, and you mentioned jobs, and that was one of the key issues with Heathrow, wasn't it? Actually, local MPs whose constituents actually work at Heathrow or can possibly get jobs at Heathrow, they were very much in favour of Heathrow. Unite, the union, reckon there are tens of thousands of jobs that are going to be going to be available as a result of the third runway being expanded. It's all very well for those in leafy suburbs saying, "Oh, I'd rather be able to enjoy my garden on a Saturday afternoon without a plane going overhead." But what about other people who rely on their livelihoods for jobs at an expanded Heathrow?
I mean, those jobs don't exist at the moment, and
in that case,
investing in things like the railways and things that work for everyone. If we had a long-term green industrial strategy that meant that we were looking at how we met our needs.
How am I going to get a train to China?
Well, I mean, I don't think this is a question necessarily about long-term. This isn't about a long-haul flight specifically, and I think we have to remember that 15% of people take 70% of the flights. I mean, fundamentally, when it comes to having the points that Labour were checking this against, this doesn't work for the majority of people.
Okay, well,
reducing the number of domestic flights that there will be that we have, as well as supporting kind of close international travel.
Okay, we'll come back. We'll come back to that issue of the people who take the flights. Nigel Evans, I think we've got you back on the line.
Hopefully,
that's much clearer. That's
now?
much clearer. Yeah, I must come back to the issue of Boris. Why do you think Boris Johnson shouldn't have resigned?
Well, as I said, it's 415 votes to 119 in the end. I mean, that's one of the largest majorities the government has had. I mean, the government's got a majority of something like -2 normally. So even with the Labour Party having a free vote, the overwhelming decision of Parliament is now to get on with it. And we really do have to get on with it. It's going to create 50,000 new jobs in itself, which is incredibly important. I know people say that there is a problem with the noise of aircraft, but with the new A380s and 787s, A350s, they are so much quieter than the aircraft of 10, 15 years ago. And all I would say to anybody about capacity is that if you go to Dubai, Abu Dhabi, or Doha in Qatar and stand in front of one of those flight boards and look to see where they fly to cities that I've never even heard of. Cities in China with populations of 30 million plus, where it's going to be vitally important post-Brexit that we have a physical presence. We've got to be able to have the capacity to fly to these places. And to be honest as well, Julia, I would shove another runway into Gatwick while we're at it as well. And look at regional airports if they want to have an extra runway, and we have to look at that too.
We need to move forward on this. Amelia Womack, look, I can absolutely understand that if you live right near one of these airports, or indeed, there's something seen some of these villages which are pretty much going to be destroyed to make way for a third runway, that this is going to be devastating, and 4 local councils are going to be taking launching a judicial review against this decision. But does there not come a point where, we're in the 21st century, people have been talking about this since pretty much just after the Second World War. We need to actually get on with this expansion. Every other country is expanding. They're building more airlines, more airports. The reality is, unless we get Star Trek teleportation sorted anytime soon, which doesn't look that likely, flying is the future.
I mean, flying is part of the past as well. I mean, the way that people are talking about this, like it's a brand new idea and brand new technology, when we really need an investment, we're in desperate need of investment elsewhere. And I think that we need to be really taking these issues around climate change seriously. This is flying has become one of the biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions, and it's dramatically rising. And there are no jobs on a dead planet. There's no economy on a dead planet. We need to be making sure.
No economy. Amelia, seriously, the CO2 levels are rising, but we haven't seen global warming anything like the temperatures that were predicted under any of the computer models.
I mean, we're seeing those rise in temperatures.
We have seen nothing like even the lowest level of the range of predictions.
It's a gradual change, and at the moment it's like we need to be making sure that we are. I mean, on top of the climate change issue, it's the air pollution issue as well. And across the UK, we see 40,000 premature deaths.
No, we don't.
When it comes
we don't, Amelia. That's not what the study says. Politicians always misquote this, and I pick every politician up on this. We see the equivalent of 40,000 lives lost in terms of people not living an extra couple of months at the end of their lives, which most people would exchange for the use of having a car, a fridge, electricity, and the like. And that's not as a result of pollution from cars. It's from us having things like fridges and electricity and central heating.
And if we're going to,
I'm sorry to use facts. I know people aren't big on facts in this field. But...
I mean, if we're going to talk about facts as well, I mean, looking at the issues around resource use, if we're going to even if you don't think that climate change is an issue, which 97% of scientists agree.
No, and again, that's not true. No, they don't. And that's not true. Amelia, seriously. I'm willing to discuss and debate this, but you've got to use some facts. Okay.
Sorry, Julia, but can I just continue? Because
not if you make stuff up, no.
It's an issue. I mean, it's widely. It's right. Widely
I will tweet you later with a link explaining why you know that's wrong, and you already know that's wrong. That's simply untrue.
Can I just finish my point, Julia? Okay. Sorry. In terms of resource use, if we are going to make sure that we are working for the future, actually, being dependent on old fuel sources, which are going to run out, where there are things that are finite and things that are infinite on this planet, and the only things that are infinite are the sun, the wind, tidal power, and actually making investments into research and development into something that will last forever.
Okay, no, but Amelia, that's an argument. Amelia, that's sorry, we're not reading speeches out on my show. That's an argument for there to be investment into quieter, cleaner planes. Surely people still want to fly. You said earlier, 15% of people take 70% of flights. So what?
I think, well, firstly, when Labour are talking about making decisions for the many, not the few, fundamentally by not having a free vote on that decision, they are making a decision for the few and not for the many. And if we had something like a flyers levy that meant that we were all able to fly free for the first time, but there was an increase in tax for every flight after that, it could mean that we were able to redistribute some of that.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that.
Divide in our society.
I take a heck of a lot of flights, do lots of short haul and long haul travel. I've got no problem with that, and I don't have a problem with us taxing aviation fuel, which currently isn't taxed. But that's not an argument for us not to build airports that we need.
It's a way of looking at how we manage our capacity that means that we're not just looking at building new runways and meaning that we are supporting people making other decisions that would mean that we are reducing the number of flights being taken, such as taking the railways for for domestic travel or just, the UK being better connected to itself rather than just to London. And I think that's something that many people who I work with are crying out for, especially in the North and Wales. And I think there are many other ways that we can look in terms of a transport strategy that does work for the many. And fundamentally, that's not what Labour were voting on last night when they didn't have a whipped vote.
OK, coming back to you, Nigel Evans, it seems to me the green argument against the airport is really basically, well, it's all these nasty rich elitist people who fly, and you shouldn't be flying, and you're bad people for flying. I'm paraphrasing, Amelia, I realise. And what we need to do is to stop people flying.
You're not paraphrasing. That is roughly the argument. In the time we've had the conversation on Talk Radio, I suspect China have planned another 10 new airports. The reality is we're competing with Schiphol in Holland, Charles de Gaulle, Frankfurt. We are competing with these major hub airports throughout Europe. Post-Brexit, we're going to need the opportunities for people to be able to go and to visit cities throughout the world to do business for firms in our own patches all over the United Kingdom. Do you know, I think the government was rather nervous last night because they may have thought, because it was a free vote on the Labour Party, that that maybe the result was going to be tight, and it wasn't. Last night was a verdict that we just need to get on with it, and I do hope that if there are action groups listening to the programme thinking, oh yes, let's go and have a judicial review. Yeah, absolutely. Garner more money, put it in the pockets of lawyers, because that's clearly what we need. Okay. The fact is it's not going to do any good. We just need to get on with it as quickly as possible and ensure that the entrepreneurs in the United Kingdom are able to fly to parts of the world that we've never heard of to do business and create jobs. We just got to get on with it, Julia.